Abraham and Isaac. Jephthah and his daughter, Mesha, the king of Moab, who butchered his own son to convince God to turn against the children of Israel. The Bible is filled with graphic stories of human sacrifice, some of which were ordered by God himself. But when you study the nature of the New Testament God, it's hard to picture that the same God who preached love, peace, and acceptance could demand that people sacrifice their own children to worship him. So, why is the Old Testament full of these bizarre stories? The first time God spoke to Abraham was in Genesis chapter 17. He was about 100 years old. His wife Sarah was 90, and although they'd been married for decades, they never had a child. God came to fix this, giving them a child to continue their lineage, with the promise of making an entire nation out of him. For the next 20 to 25 years, Isaac grew strong, just like any normal kid, learned the way of the Lord from his father, and constantly looked forward to inheriting his father's legacy. However, what started as a feel-good, wholesome story took a very dark turn in Genesis chapter 22, when God decided to test Abraham by asking him to sacrifice the one person he loved more than anything in the world, Isaac. Now, while human sacrifice isn't exactly far-fetched in the history of mankind, it was only practiced by those who worshipped the pagan gods. The true God Abraham worshipped had never demanded anything that serious from him. It wasn't just that the request was bizarre, but the way he talked about it was quite sinister. He specifically told him to take the son he loved, emphasizing the fact that Abraham really loved Isaac, and even pointed out the exact spot to sacrifice his son as a burnt offering. Early the next morning, Abraham saddled his donkey, split some wood for the offerings, took 2 of his young servants and his son, and together they set out for the land of Moriah, where God instructed him to go. After traveling for 3 straight days, Abraham finally spotted the mountain in the distance. So he asked the 2 servants to stay with the donkey while he and Isaac went up to offer the sacrifice. It was at this point that Isaac started noticing that he might actually be the offering. However, just as Abraham was about to slaughter his own son, God stopped him and just told him he just passed the test. All he wanted to see was how much Abraham trusted him. And then Abraham looked up, saw a ram caught in the bushes, and sacrificed that instead. But while Isaac managed to escape, the next time God was presented with human sacrifice, he actually accepted it. The story of Jephthah is one of the most heartbreaking tales in the history of the Bible. It begins in Judges 11, where he's introduced as a mighty man of valor who got kicked out of his father's house by his other siblings because his mother was a mistress. After he fled to the land of Tob, a group of rebels gathered around him and made him their leader. So he had his own little militia. A couple of years later, the same people who kicked him out went searching for him after they were attacked by the children of Ammon. In exchange for fighting this battle, Jephthah demanded they make him their leader if he came back victorious. However, just before he embarked on this dangerous mission, he made a promise to God, saying, "If you give me a clear victory over the Ammonites, then I'll give to God whatever comes out of the door of my house to meet me when I return in one piece from among the Ammonites. I'll offer it up in a sacrificial burnt offering." Not surprisingly, he won the battle, defeating 20 cities and capturing even more land for the children of Israel. Unfortunately though, as he made his way back home from the battlefield, Jephthah came face to face with the hardest decision of his life. Running right through the gates was his only daughter. She'd heard of his victory and was coming to celebrate him with timbrels and with dances. Jephthah's heart was broken into 1,000,000 pieces. He knew he couldn't go back on his word, since God gave him the victory he asked for. To give his daughter some time to lament her impending demise, Jephthah sent her and her friends to the mountains for 2 months. But after this wailing period was over, she came back to her father and was offered as a burnt offering unto the Lord. But what if I told you the next human sacrifice God accepted wasn't even offered to him directly? It was the 18th year of the reign of Jehoshaphat, the king of Judah. Ahab, the king of Israel, had just passed away, and King Mesha of Moab saw this as an opportunity to free himself from the shackles of the children of Israel. You see, during the reign of King Ahab, Mesha was forced to give him 100,000 lambs and another 100,000 rams, which was obviously inconvenient. So once he saw the chance, he immediately rebelled against Israel, and so the war began. On one hand, there was the coalition of Jehoshaphat, Joram, the new king of Israel, and the king of Edom, and on the other hand was Mesha, who had no one else but his men. While on their way to the battlefield, the coalition army got stuck in the wilderness without water, forcing them to ask Elisha for help. By a miracle, they managed to get enough water for themselves and their livestock, along with a promise that they would ravage the country, knock out its fortifications, level the key villages, clear-cut the orchards, clog the springs, and litter the cultivated fields with stones. And to an extent, they actually did, because for the most part, the battle went in their favor. They slaughtered the army of the Moabites with relative ease, filled the entire city with stones so nobody could live there anymore, and almost captured Mesha until he decided to do something absolutely crazy. After failing to break through the defenses of the king of Edom with around 700 soldiers, Mesha took his first son, who was supposed to succeed him on the throne, went up to the city walls and offered him as a burnt offering in front of everyone, including the army of Israel, Judah, and Edom. The sacrifice was originally meant for the Moabite god Chemosh. However, it ended up triggering such an insane level of indignation against the children of Israel that they immediately turned back and went home. So, was this Chemosh's doing, or was God so moved by the sacrifice that he turned against his own people? Let me know what you think in the comments. Another instance where human sacrifice was referenced was in 1 Kings chapter 16, where the Bible records the story of Heel, a Bethelite who embarked on a mission to rebuild the city of Jericho. For context, after Joshua and the army of Israel defeated the people of Jericho while on their way to the Promised Land, Joshua placed a curse on the land, saying, "Cursed before God is the man who sets out to rebuild this city, Jericho. He'll pay for the foundation with his firstborn son. He'll pay for the gates with his youngest son." So as soon as Heel laid the foundation for the city, he sacrificed his first son Abiram, and the moment they started setting up the gates at completion, he offered his youngest son, Segub, as the final sacrifice. Later in 2 Kings chapter 16 and 21, the Bible also documents the story of Ahaz and Manasseh, the two kings of Israel, who sacrificed his son in the fire, following the detestable ways of the nations the Lord had driven out before the Israelites, practiced sorcery and divination, and consulted mediums and spiritists. He did much evil in the eyes of the Lord, provoking him to anger. Could this be the reason God himself chose to sacrifice his only begotten Son in the New Testament, serving as the ultimate offering for all the sins of mankind? Or did God even approve of these human sacrifices in the first place? Obviously, the first time the kind of bizarre practice was recorded in the Bible, God himself requested it as a test of Abraham's faith. As for the other cases, though, the sacrifice was initiated by people who either believed they could provoke the hand of God or did it out of necessity. It becomes even more apparent that God was not comfortable with human sacrifice when you consider the fact that he got mad at Ahaz and Manasseh for doing it, as well as the many times he openly spoke against it. Like in Deuteronomy chapter 18 verse 10, where he said, "There shall not be found among you anyone who burns his son or his daughter as an offering, anyone who practices divination or tells fortunes or interprets omens, or a sorcerer." Or Jeremiah chapter 7, verse 31, where he clearly stated, "And they have built the high places of Topheth, which is in the valley of the son of Hinnom, to burn their sons and their daughters in the fire, which I did not command, nor did it come into my mind." It's safe to say God didn't sanction these human sacrifices, and judging by the new wave of grace that swept across the earth in the New Testament, God has opened up a perfect way of worship that doesn't demand any more blood sacrifice from man.